Here's a good way to check and make sure that your wheel bearing is bad. Not that you won't hear it and shouldn't know, but your wheel should not do this. It should not move like it is. So, if I can get a good view of this. But essentially, you can see how it's moving left and right and all over the place. It should not be moving like that. So that's right there, a good indication that your wheel bearing is shot. And this one's obviously been shot for some time and I just haven't had a chance to get to it. So now we're getting to it. The first thing we need to do to start replacing the wheel bearing and hub assembly on this 2008 F-250 is to take off the lug nuts. So there's a cover, which in all fairness, I took off with a screwdriver before I started this film. But you take that off, and then the first thing you're gonna need is your 13/16 socket. And I'm fortunate enough to have some air tools. So I used the air gun. We took off the lug nuts. And once the lug nuts are off, we will take the tire off. And then the next step will be, after take the tire off, we'll have to take off this cover for the lockout. And we'll also have to take off the brake assembly, because after we remove the caliper and the brakes, we'll also have to remove the disc in order to get the wheel bearing assembly off. So, okay, give me 1 second here and I'll show you what it looks like with the wheel off. Now that the wheel is off, you can see what I mean about having to remove the caliper and caliper assembly here with the brake pads and everything else. So my rotors are still in good shape. We had these reground when we did the brakes last time, and we still have plenty of life on the pad, which you can't really see from here. Maybe you'll get a better view when I pull the caliper off. But to remove the caliper, what you need is a 5/8 wrench. So this 5/8 wrench should just come loose, and after it comes loose, you'll just ratchet it off. So one bolt on top, one bolt on the bottom, and we will remove that. Once you have the two bolts out to hold the brake caliper in, which are those two bolts down there, but again, those two bolts go into here and they go through the caliper and they hold it to this, I don't know what you're gonna call it here, but like the caliper assembly. Then you have to take that off, because that's what's holding on your disc now. And so for that, you're gonna need a 13/16 wrench. So with your 13/16, you can put it on this bolt, and there's also one on the bottom down there, you can see, on that one right there. And loosen those two bolts up, and I put it on here and like tap it with a sledgehammer to get it cracked loose, and then you can take it off by hand. But we'll take those two bolts out, and that will remove this caliper, like the way basically for the caliper, and then we'll be able to start pulling off the disc, and then behind the disc it'll be the hub. So let's get that apart. After you remove those two bolts, the bracket will come loose. So there's the bracket. It'll come out of there, and then you've got to get the disc off. So the disc was actually pretty seized on. I wouldn't say seized on, but I mean, it was rusted on. You can see all this rust and everything else that it's probably adhered to. So I just took very gently a sledgehammer and tapped it from behind, and eventually it just slid off the wheel lugs there. So that's all you have to do. Just gently tap it with a sledgehammer until it comes off. Like I said, you don't want to damage your disc, so be very careful. But once you get the disc off, now we're getting close to finally getting to the wheel bearing. So we're going to remove this hub locker with the star wrenches, and then we should just have 4 bolts. So you can see one's there, and then of course on the bottom there's 2 as well. And then this wire is part of the ABS sensor, so we'll have to pull that off too. So yeah, let's start disassembling the hub finally. So a tip is, when you're trying to get these nuts off of the back, turn the wheel, because if you turn the wheel, you can get an angle on it like this and get your breaker bar on it and break it loose. And surprisingly, they weren't on there that bad. So you're not actually twisting that bolt out of the flange that you can see. That's not spinning. There's a nut on the back of these, which is on there, and I actually got this one off already. So it's just a nut that comes off, and that whole thing will come apart. So I think, I'm having a hard time seeing it, but I want to say it's a 13/16. Yeah, 13/16. So you'll need a 13/16 and a good cheater bar or breaker bar to get that sucker off there. Once you have those 4 bolts off the back, And like I said, they actually weren't terribly hard to get off. Just make sure you know righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. You're going to need a T25. If that'll focus, and it does, T25 is the star that you need to take these off. So after we take these out here, these are actually very short because I took this off the other day when I was looking just to see if anything looked terribly bad in here, and it didn't. And that's kind of my discovery as to why I needed a wheel bearing. I kind of already know a lot of the tools that we're going to need to do this because of that, at least for this part of it. And the reason I say that is you're going to see in just a second here when we take this off. See, these are pretty short. The actual special tool that you really need. So this comes out of here pretty easy, or it did for me the other day at least. Oh man, that's hard to do with holding the camera. There we go. And this will come right out. And this is your locker, your manual locker for your bearings. When you turn this, that gear on the inside moves in and out up against the other bearing. So pretty cool to see how that actually works. So anyway, we're going to set this off to the side. But here is where you're going to run into an issue when you go to do this. If you can see that, that is a snap ring. And let me tell you, snap ring pliers that can reach back into there and that are strong enough to do the job are not going to be found at your local hardware store. I called every hardware store, Tractor Supply, I went to Harbor Freight, I tried everything. This is the heavy dutiest, that's even a word, but the most heavy duty snap ring plier I could find. This one was at Harbor Freight, and it had like extensions you could put in here. And I even made my own extensions out of some screws, so I just ground them down on the grinder so I could get far enough back in there to do it, and it was not nearly strong enough. So this is a tool you have to buy. It stinks. This is the Nipix 4611A3. Now, there's a bunch of people online that buy the 4611A4, and the 4611A4 is like 40 bucks on Amazon. The 4611A3 is 20 bucks on Amazon. And if you go and read the reviews, both tools are, everybody's saying this is the tool you need when you're doing an F-250 or an F-350 to reach far enough back in. So I have not tried this yet, so this will be the moment of truth. Let's see if we can use this $20 tool to get this snap ring off. And we'll try it on camera. Sorry about the poor filming here. Okay, I got one side in. Now I'm trying to get the other side in. Okay, that's in. Oh man, yep, hold on. And there it is. It came right out. I set the camera down, got two hands on it, and pulled it out. But as you can see, that is one heavy-duty snap ring. So you really do need this tool. I mean, it stinks to buy a $20 tool to do one job, but let me tell you, it's going to be worth it since you're not paying, you know, a mechanic shop to do it. It's worth the 20 bucks, and now if you ever have to do one again, or if your buddy has one, you can lend him the tool, and he can owe you a 6-pack. To remove the ABS sensor, you're going to need a 13/16 Allen head wrench. So that's what goes in there, and then that will loosen this, and you can take off that sensor. So that was surprisingly easier than I thought it would be. I took the crowbar here that I have, and I just put the crowbar between this face and this face, and the whole thing came out very easily, actually. And when I flipped it over and looked, there was a bunch of crud in here, including like, this is like a spring of some kind, so I have no idea, that obviously you can't get it to focus, came out of the bearing. So this was definitely bad, and there's a bunch of junk down in there. So we're going to clean this out, and we'll put some grease back in it, and then we'll reassemble with the new one. Here's our two bearings side by side, and it did come with 4 studs that I'll need to push in or I'm sorry, push a screw in. And it also came with a new retaining clip. So yeah, I'm gonna do is put these into these holes and tighten them up so it looks like the other one, and then we'll reassemble. And this one also came with the new ABS sensor, which is good, because I didn't show it on film. I showed you what the screws, if you take it out, but mine actually broke. I was trying to remove it because it was rusted in super well, I guess you want to call it. So yeah, we're just going to put the stud bolts in here, put that back together, hook up the ABS line, and start reassembly. Oh, I also forgot, we're going to want to grease, put some wheel bearing grease in here, and some wheel bearing grease in the where the hub lockout goes, because obviously the old one had grease in it and the new one won't, so it'll need some extra grease. So we'll just make sure we pack a little grease in there as we reassemble it. And this is a 5/16 that you need to use, which, oh, I can't get the focus, but a 5/16 is what will take out all these little nuts that are on here, or I guess they're little screws. But as we remove these, we'll go around. There's one here, one there, and there might be another one. There's a clip right there, and maybe there's another clip underneath this the brake bracket. But we'll take apart, this is the ABS sensor line, so we just have to take that one out so we can install this one, like I mentioned just a few seconds ago. ABS sensors in. There was one screw there, two screws there, a clip that pushed into the frame rail, and then a clip that you had to like unlock to put in there. And then again, that's where the sensor actually plugged in, and there was a clip on the end of the sensor that you can see you pushed out with your thumb, and it pulled right out real easy. So now what we got to do is we got to put the disc back on. So we're going to put the disc on, and we still got to remember to put the clip in here and grease that. But we're going to go ahead and put the disc on and then start assembling the brake assembly. And that's all put back together. So again, we put the retaining clip on, we packed that with some grease, we packed the bearing and all the little crevices we could find with some grease when we put the lockout back in. Brake caliper is back in, as well as the ways are bolted back on, and everything's all set up and ready to go for a test drive. So all we got to do now is put the wheel back on, and we'll tighten it down and go for a test drive. But that's how you replace your wheel bearing on an F-250. And again, this is a 2008 F-250.